Snow was falling heavy that night, covering the city in silence, when a small voice broke through the cold. A little girl, no older than 7, shivered beneath a tree, whispering, "Please take me home, sir." Dozens of people passed, but no one stopped until a powerful CEO, a man who had spent years chasing success and forgetting his heart, made a choice that would change both of their lives forever. What began as a chance encounter in the snow became a story of redemption, protection, and the unexpected meaning of family. This isn't just about rescuing a child from the cold. It's about how love can appear when we least expect it, and how staying, not leaving, is what truly heals. Stay with us for this unforgettable story. And don't forget to subscribe to Loss and Healing, where every tale touches the soul and reminds you of hope. Snow drifted down in soft, endless sheets, coating the city with a silence that felt almost sacred. Chicago's streets, usually alive with traffic and hurried voices, had been muted under winter's heavy hand. In the heart of Grant Park, rows of benches stood empty, their wooden slats covered in a thin white blanket. The air was sharp, every breath visible as a ghost of warmth that vanished as quickly as it appeared. In this stillness, a man sat alone, his shoulders curved inward, as though the weight of an unseen burden pressed down upon him. His name was Ethan Cole, a man whose face was well known in glossy magazines and financial reports. But in this moment, he looked like anyone else, just another soul trying to find something worth holding on to in the cold. His navy overcoat was buttoned to the collar, but it did little to warm him. A paper cup rested between his gloved hands, the coffee inside long gone cold. He had not forgotten to drink it. He simply did not need it. Warmth, in all its forms, had been absent from his life for longer than he cared to admit. On his phone screen, a reminder blinked. A dinner with investors at an upscale restaurant, the sort of meeting that had once meant everything to him. A car was waiting. His presence was expected. Yet, Ethan simply let the screen dim, refusing to move. He was tired of being the man who always showed up for money but never for himself. Instead, he opened his photo gallery and stopped at an old picture, faded and grainy from the low-quality phone he had owned in college. In it, a young woman tilted her head back and laughed as snowflakes tangled in her dark hair. Sophia. Even her name stirred something sharp and aching within him. She had been the one bright chapter in a time of uncertainty, the woman he had walked away from when ambition demanded sacrifice. He had told himself then that he would return, that dreams had to come first. But the years had slipped away, and Sophia had become nothing more than a memory stitched into a photograph. Now, sitting on the bench, he wondered if he had lost more than he had ever gained. His breath fogged in front of him as he slipped the phone back into his coat. Just then, a sound pierced the quiet, a soft whimper, fragile and easy to miss beneath the whisper of the wind. He froze, listening. It came again, higher this time, sharp enough to cut through the night. Ethan stood slowly, his polished shoes crunching over the snow, the kind of sound that echoed louder in emptiness. Following the faint cries, he reached the edge of a path where a bare-limbed tree stretched upward like broken fingers against the night sky. There, half hidden in its shadow, was a small figure. A little girl, no more than 7 years old, huddled against the trunk as if trying to vanish into the bark. Her coat was too thin for the season, the fabric ripped along one sleeve, and her shoes were soaked through. In her arms, she clutched a worn doll with a missing shoe, her only shield against the cold. Her head hung low, eyes fixed on the snow beneath her as though lifting them would bring a danger she was not ready to face. Ethan approached slowly, his instinct torn between caution and urgency. When her eyes finally lifted to meet his, they were wide, glassy, and heavy with a weight that no child should carry. Her lips trembled as she whispered, almost lost to the wind, "Please, please take me home, sir." The word struck Ethan like a physical blow. Not confusion, not curiosity. It was a plea born from desperation, fragile and raw. Something in his chest tightened painfully, something he had thought buried beneath years of boardrooms and negotiations. He crouched, lowering himself to her level, his voice gentler than he had spoken in years.
Where
are your parents? His gaze swept the park, searching for anyone who might belong to her. But there was no one, just snow, silence, and the faint glow of a streetlight. She swallowed, her lips cracked and reddened from the cold. "Mom's in the sky now," she said simply, "and I cannot go back." He will hurt me. Ethan's throat constricted. Who will hurt you? Her answer was a whisper, but carried the weight of truth. My stepdad. The words, spoken with a strange flatness, carried no drama, no attempt at persuasion. It sounded like a story she had told herself many times, rehearsed until it became part of her bones. Ethan reached out, slipping off his gloves, and gently wrapped his bare hands around hers. Her fingers were stiff, ice-cold, fragile as porcelain. "What is your name?" he asked softly. "Lily," she murmured. "Lily Morgan." His own voice faltered as he replied, "Okay, Lily, I am going to help you. You do not have to stay out here." He shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her small frame. The fabric swallowed her, but instead of resisting, she leaned into it, pressing her face against the wool like a cat drawn to warmth. As he adjusted the coat, her sleeve slipped back, revealing bruises shaped like fingers along her forearm. Ethan's jaw clenched as his heart ached with both rage and sorrow. A single tear slid down her cheek, catching the streetlight. Without another thought, he lifted her gently into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and yet in that moment, she carried the full weight of his world. As he stepped forward, her voice trembled against his chest. "Are you a bad man too?" He froze mid-stride, his heart cracking a little wider. His answer came as a whisper, rough with emotion. No, I am not." And with those words, he carried her away from the snow-covered bench, away from the ghosts of his past, and unknowingly toward a future he never expected. The diner was nearly empty when Ethan pushed the door open, the bell above it jingling weakly against the cold wind. Inside, the place smelled faintly of burnt coffee and grease, a comfort in its own way. Red vinyl booths lined the walls, their seams cracked from years of use, and a teenage waitress wiped at a table without much interest, glancing briefly at the new arrival before returning to her task. Ethan chose a corner booth far from the window and sat with the child still wrapped in his coat. Her shivering had lessened, but her body remained rigid against him, as though bracing for something unseen. He ordered hot chocolate without asking her preference, trusting that warmth and sweetness were what she needed most. When the steaming mug arrived, he set it carefully in front of her. She looked at it warily at first, then reached out with both hands, her small fingers trembling as they gripped the cup. She leaned forward, allowing the steam to rise against her chilled cheeks. And for a moment, her expression softened, as if the world outside did not exist. Ethan watched in silence, his chest tight with emotions he could not name. He had faced mergers worth billions, cutthroat negotiations, and political battles that had drained seasoned executives. Yet nothing had unsettled him like watching this little girl cradle a mug of cocoa as though it were the most fragile miracle. "Are you warmer now?" he asked quietly. She nodded once but kept her eyes on the cup. The doll she clutched earlier rested in her lap, frayed and worn, its missing shoe dangling by a single thread. She did not touch the toast or soup the waitress brought, only the cocoa, her reflection rippling in its surface. After a long pause, her small voice broke the silence. "Thank you for not leaving." Ethan swallowed hard. The words struck deeper than they should have, carrying echoes of every person he had once left behind, every moment when ambition had whispered louder than affection. "Of course," he said softly, "I am not going anywhere." The promise slipped out before he could second-guess it. It felt both terrifying and liberating. Her tangled hair hung around her face, damp from melted snow. When she finally lifted her gaze, it was not with hesitation, but with a curious steadiness. "My name's Lily Morgan," she whispered again, as though testing whether he was truly listening this time. Ethan smiled gently. "That is a beautiful name. I am Ethan." She nodded, then surprised him with words he did not expect. "I know." His brows furrowed. "You know who I am?" For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then she whispered, "My mom told me." Ethan's breath caught. "Your mom? What was her name?" The answer shattered the thin layer of composure he had built. "Sophia," she said. Sophia Morgan. The name hit him like a thunderclap, and the diner seemed to tilt around him. The clatter of dishes, the low hum of a trucker at the counter, all faded into static. He felt as though the floor had been yanked from beneath his feet. Sophia. The woman whose laughter had once filled snowy college quads.
I promised to stay.
The woman he had loved, left, and carried in memory for years. Lily's voice continued, calm but devastating. "She said she loved a boy once in college, but he left. She said he was too scared to stay, but he was kind. Ethan's chest tightened until he could barely breathe. Did she ever talk about what happened to him? Lily reached into the pocket of her coat and pulled out something small, silver, and shining faintly under the diner's buzzing light. She placed it on the table with great care. It was a pendanta heart-shaped locket on a thin chain. Etched on its back were the initials S and E. Ethan's breath left him in a rush. His vision blurred for a moment as memories surged. The snowy night when he had given Sophia that necklace. Her eyes alight with trust as she told him to make sure what he was chasing was worth losing her. He reached out, his hand trembling, and touched the pendant. "Lily," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I gave this to your mom, a long time ago." She studied him carefully, her gray eyes, Sophia's eyes meeting his with quiet gravity. She said the boy who gave it to her was the only one she ever trusted. The child's words carried no blame, only truth. She wore it until she died. Ethan stood abruptly, his body unable to contain the storm inside.
Hi there, sweetie.
He paced to the diner's window, staring out at the snow-blanketed street. His reflection stared back, warped in the glass, but beside it was hers, small and fragile, watching him. He should call the police, he told himself. He should hand her to the system, let professionals decide what came next. That was the responsible choice, the safe choice. But when he turned and saw her clutching the doll, her eyes tired and too old for her years, he knew with absolute certainty that handing her off was something he could not do. He walked back slowly, kneeling beside her. "You are safe with me," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. She hesitated, then asked in a whisper, "You are not mad?" He shook his head. "No, I am only sorry you had to find me this way." For a moment, the heaviness in her face eased, and she allowed herself to lean toward him. Something inside him shifted then, a choice so quiet it barely made a sound, yet it changed everything. He would not let her go back. He would not let her fade into the cold. When they left the diner, the snow still fell in lazy sheets, but it no longer felt suffocating. He booked a car under his name, directing it to one of his hotels. The ride was silent, except for the city's muffled rhythm outside. Lily sat beside him, cocooned in his coat, her eyes tracing the lights along the streets. She did not ask where they were going. She only clutched her doll tighter, as if bracing herself for disappointment. Ethan glanced at her, and something tender yet fierce sparked inside him. For the first time in years, he felt as though he had a reason to stay. Not for a board, not for investors, but for a little girl who carried Sophia's eyes and Sophia's trust. When the car pulled up to the hotel, Ethan led her inside through the grand lobby, past the polished marble floors and chandeliers. She looked around in quiet wonder, her small steps hesitant as though she were trespassing in a world that did not belong to her. But to Ethan, it suddenly felt as though the place had been waiting for her all along. When they reached the penthouse, he showed her the fireplace glowing against dark walls, the bed with its heavy white comforter, the silence that promised safety. Lily stood in the middle of the room, her gaze distant, as though she could not believe it was real. He handed her a robe from the closet and said softly, "Go change out of those wet clothes, I will order food." She nodded, her trust tentative but real. As she disappeared into the bathroom, Ethan sank onto the edge of the bed, his mind racing. His life, once measured in deals and deadlines, had been rewritten in a single night. And for the first time, he did not feel fear in letting go of that world. He felt something else, something he had almost forgotten: hope. The night passed slowly, filled with the crackle of the fireplace and the muffled hush of snow falling against the tall windows. Ethan sat awake, long after Lily had curled beneath the thick comforter, her doll tucked against her chest. He had ordered food she barely touched, cocoa she finished with both hands wrapped tight around the mug, and then watched as exhaustion pulled her into sleep. For the first time, she looked like a child, again small, innocent, fragile. Ethan stayed in the doorway longer than he intended, afraid that leaving might somehow undo the fragile safety she had found. By morning, the suite was filled with muted light. Ethan had not slept. He sat on the couch, coffee cooling untouched on the table. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sophia's pendant glinting on the diner table, or Lily's bruised arms when her sleeve had slipped back. Guilt pressed against him like the cold glass of the window. He had spent years mastering control, building empires, commanding boardrooms. Yet now, Confronted by one child's quiet trust, he felt utterly undone. The sound of soft footsteps drew his eyes toward the bedroom door. Lily emerged, wrapped in the oversized hotel robe, her hair tangled but her lips no longer blue. She blinked against the brightness, her bare feet padding across the floor. "Do I have to leave today?" she asked, her voice so small it pierced him. Ethan shook his head. "No, Lily, you can stay as long as you need." She nodded slowly, as though she had learned not to expect promises to hold. Later that morning, while she nibbled on toast and fruit in silence, Ethan stepped into the next room and made phone calls he never thought he would make. He called a doctor he trusted, asking for discretion and speed. He called a family lawyer, a trauma counselor, even a private investigator. Each word carried urgency. He was not building a business strategy now. He was building a fortress around a child. When the physician arrived, an older woman named Dr. Harding, she greeted Lily with a smile that carried no threat. "Hi, sweetheart, I just want to make sure you are okay. Just you and me for a few minutes." Ethan stood outside the door, listening, his heart pounding when Lily flinched at the touch of fabric pulled back from her arm. When Dr. Harding emerged, her voice was low but firm. "She has multiple bruises, some are fresh, others healing. She is underweight, and she shows signs of emotional trauma. Whoever she lived with, it was not safe." Ethan clenched his fists. "CPS?" the doctor asked gently. "Not yet," he admitted. "I wanted to be sure. I do not want her lost in the system." The doctor studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Then you had better act quickly, because if that man finds her, he will try to take her back." The words chilled him more than the snow outside. That evening, after Lily had taken a warm bath, she sat curled on the couch in soft pajamas Ethan had sent the staff to fetch. Her hair was damp, her cheeks touched with color again. Ethan placed a tray with grilled cheese and tomato soup in front of her, and for the first time he saw the faint flicker of a smile at the smell. "Do you live here?" she asked suddenly. Ethan shook his head. "No, I have a place uptown. This is one of my hotels." Her eyes narrowed with curiosity. "So, you are rich?" He hesitated, then gave a small smile. "I guess you could say that." She thought for a moment, then asked the question that landed like a stone in his chest. "Does that mean you can keep me safe forever?" Ethan stared at her, words catching in his throat. Finally, he said softly, "I want to, more than anything." She lowered her eyes, not ready to believe him yet. But the question itself told him more than any doctor's report ever could. This was not just about survival. It was about trust, about proving to a child who had been betrayed that safety could last. The days that followed unfolded like fragile gifts. Ethan canceled meetings, ignored calls, and rescheduled obligations that once felt immovable. Instead of keynote speeches and board votes, he spent mornings teaching Lily how to pour pancake batter into shapes of stars. Afternoons meant trips to the bookstore, where she sat cross-legged in the children's nook, flipping pages with cautious fascination. Evenings ended with coloring books spread across the coffee table, and Ethan reading stories aloud, in a voice that surprised him with its tenderness. One afternoon, he returned from the kitchen carrying slices of apple to find her at the desk, tongue sticking out in concentration as she pressed crayons hard against paper. "What are you working on?" he asked. She held up a picture shyly. It was a small house, with smoke curling from the chimney. In front of it, 3 figures stood on with a long dress and wings floating above, a girl holding a doll, and a tall man in a suit smiling beside her. Ethan's chest constricted as he took the paper. "Is that me?" he asked softly. She nodded. "You are the one that makes the house warm." He pressed the drawing to his chest, blinking against the sting in his eyes. It was then he realized she was no longer just someone he had stumbled upon. She was someone he needed to protect, someone who had already begun to rebuild the hollow spaces inside him. That night, after Lily fell asleep, he stood alone in the penthouse living room. The skyline blinked in the distance, the city that had once been his empire. Now it felt meaningless. In his pocket was Lily's drawing, folded carefully, more valuable than any contract he had ever signed. He whispered into the silence, unsure if he was speaking to Sophia, to himself, or to the snow that had carried this child into his arms. "I do not know what I am doing, but I know I cannot let her go."
It is yours.
The penthouse no longer felt like a monument to wealth. It sounded different now. No longer sterile and echoing, but alive with small sounds, the scratch of crayon on paper, the shuffle of socked feet across hardwood, the occasional burst of childish laughter. It no longer sounded like success. It sounded like life. The warmth of routine had just begun to settle when the fragile calm cracked. It started not with a voice but with an envelope, thick, manila, hand-delivered to the hotel's front desk with Ethan's name scrawled in heavy black letters. He received it as he and Lily returned from the grocery store, her arms full of paper snowflakes she had made at the children's workshop. Ethan slipped the envelope under his coat, heart pounding though he had not yet opened it. In the elevator, while Lily hummed softly, he tore it open. Inside was a formal notice of intent to pursue custody, filed by Mark Ridley, her stepfather. A demand for immediate surrender of the child named Lily Morgan, the words blurred in front of his eyes. He tucked the envelope away before Lily could see, forcing a smile as he let her set the table for lunch. But in his study, behind a closed door, his voice turned sharp with urgency as he called Cal Monroe, his old friend and trusted counsel. He is coming for her, Ethan said tightly. He has lawyers. He is claiming I kidnapped her. Silence lingered on the other end before Cal's steady voice cut through. Do you want me to bury him? No, Ethan answered, though his hands trembled. I want to win legally, permanently. That evening, as Lily brushed her doll's tangled hair on the couch, a knock shook the penthouse door. At first, Ethan thought it might be room service, but the second knock was louder, heavier, followed by angry voices in the hall. When he opened the door, 2 hotel security officers stood pressed against a man whose eyes burned red and wild. Mark Ridley. His presence filled the hallway with the stench of alcohol and rage. That is my daughter in there, he spat. You cannot keep her. Ethan stood firm, jaw set. She is not safe with you. Mark's laugh was harsh, bitter. She is not safe with some stranger either. You think money makes you a parent? His voice rose, drawing curious faces from down the hall. And then came the sound that shattered the piercing scream of Lily. She had come to the doorway unnoticed, her small body frozen with terror. Get him away, she cried, running into Ethan's arms. Her words shook with desperation. Please do not let him take me. He hurt my mom. He hurt me. The hallway froze. Guests who had gathered fell silent. Even the security guards stiffened at her words. Mark's bluster faltered, his protestations crumbling under the weight of her sobs. Ethan held her tightly, shielding her with his body. I think you should leave, Ethan said coldly, his voice edged with steel. This time the guards did not wait for orders. They forced Mark back, his shouting trailing down the hall until the elevator doors closed around him. Ethan carried Lily inside, her face pressed against his chest, her small hands gripping his shirt as though letting go would mean losing everything. For a long time she did not speak. She only wept quietly, her tears soaking into the fabric of his coat. Ethan rocked her gently, whispering, You are safe. I will not let him hurt you again. Finally, in a voice so small it barely existed, she asked, Are they going to make me go with him? Ethan kissed her temple, fighting the tightness in his throat. Not if I can help it. Later, when she had fallen asleep against him, he stepped onto the balcony. Snow fell again, soft and unhurried, the city below glowing with indifferent light. He did not feel like the man he used to be the one who chose distance over closeness, silence over sincerity. He pulled out his phone and texted Cal with firm resolve. File for emergency guardianship tomorrow morning. The reply came quickly. Already drafting it. We will win this. The next day, Ethan brought Lily to the mezzanine floor, where she joined other children cutting and painting. He wanted her surrounded by light, by color, by gentleness. Downstairs, in a private lounge, he met with a court-appointed counselor. He presented Dr. Harding's medical report, neighbors' testimonies, even security footage of Lily's panic when Mark had appeared at the hotel. The counselor, a silver-haired woman with calm, discerning eyes, listened carefully. After a long pause, she spoke. She trusts you. That matters more than most people realize. Ethan's voice softened, raw with honesty. She is not just a child to me. She is someone I did not know I was waiting for. His words surprised even himself, but they rang with truth. Upstairs, when he returned, Lily handed him a drawing. This one showed 3 figures again, the girl, the man, and an angel with wings holding a thread tied to them both. Across the sky, she had drawn a line of stars. In her careful handwriting beneath, it read, We are all still connected. Ethan stared at the drawing until his hands trembled. That night, while tucking her into bed, he sat longer than usual. "Lily," he said gently, "I know things feel scary right now, but I need you to know something. No matter what anyone else says, no matter what any paper decides, you are mine now." She blinked up at him, uncertain. "Yours?" Ethan nodded, his voice breaking. "Yes. You are not just someone I found in the snow. You are someone I care about more than anything. And I will fight to make sure you never have to feel afraid again." Her lip quivered before she threw her arms around his neck, clinging fiercely. "You feel like family," she whispered. His chest tightened as he whispered back, "You are." And in that moment, surrounded by the hush of snow outside and the fragile warmth within, Ethan knew he had crossed a point of no return. This was not charity, not guilt, not chance. This was love born of choice. The courtroom carried a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, flickering against sterile walls that had witnessed too many fractured families. Wooden benches creaked under the weight of strangers, but to Ethan, the only sound that mattered was the steady beat of his own heart. He sat at the front, his hands folded tightly on the table, his jaw tense. Across the aisle, Mark Ridley slouched in his chair, his lawyer beside him looking uninterested, as though this were just another file in a stack of endless cases. But this was not just another case. This was Lily's future. Ethan's attorney began by presenting the evidence. Medical reports detailing Lily's injuries, testimony from neighbors who had heard shouting through the thin walls of her old apartment, and hotel security footage capturing the terror in her voice when she saw Mark in the hallway. Each piece was laid out like bricks, building the undeniable truth that Lily had been harmed, that she had lived in fear. Mark's defense was thin, insisting that he had raised her since her mother's death, that he was all she had left. He sneered at Ethan, painting him as a stranger trying to steal what was his. But Ethan knew that blood alone did not make someone a parent. Love did, protection did, staying when it mattered did. The judge, a woman with steel gray hair and an expression weathered by years of difficult rulings, listened in silence. Then she turned to Nora Whitman, the guardian ad litem assigned to Lily. Nora stood slowly, her hands clasped in front of her. Her voice was calm but carried a weight that commanded the room. "Your Honor, I have met with Lily 3 times over the past week. I have listened to her stories, watched her draw pictures, and observed her interactions with Mr. Cole. Lily is not confused. She is not coached. She is a child who has lived through trauma and has now found safety for the first time in her life." From her folder, Nora pulled out a drawing. Ethan's breath caught the moment he saw it. He recognized the picture instantly. A house, a little girl, and a tall man in a suit holding her hand. Above them floated a star with curly hair and a smiling face. Nora's voice softened as she explained, "She drew this yesterday. She told me the angel is her mother, and the man is the one she wants to live with." Her exact words were, "He feels like home." The room went silent. Even the judge's pen stilled above her notes. For Ethan, the moment was nearly unbearable. His chest ached with both grief and hope. Sophia's presence was there in the drawing, guiding their daughter even now. The judge did not rule immediately.
Good morning.
Instead, she announced,
Good morning.
"We will
How are
reconvene
you?
tomorrow morning for my decision." The gavel struck once, and the courtroom emptied. Ethan rose on unsteady legs, his pulse roaring in his ears. Outside in the hallway, Lily waited on a bench beside Nora, her feet swinging nervously. The moment she saw Ethan, she looked up with wide eyes. "Did we win?" she whispered. Ethan crouched before her, forcing a smile. "Not yet, but we are closer." She nodded solemnly, as if she understood the weight of patience far better than most children her age. Then she reached into her backpack and handed him a folded piece of paper. When he opened it, his breath caught again. It was a new drawing house, larger than before, windows glowing with yellow light. In front of it stood 3 figures: a girl, a man with a tie, and above the door, 3 letters scrawled in shaky handwriting. D.A.D. Ethan stared at the word until his vision blurred. He folded the paper carefully and pressed it to his chest. Tomorrow could change everything, but in her eyes, the choice had already been made. That night, sleep eluded him. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled hum of the city beyond the windows. For the first time in his life, he was not afraid of losing a deal, a client, or his reputation. He was afraid of losing a little girl who had become the center of his world. When morning came, He dressed in silence and held Lily's hand as they walked back into the courtroom. The atmosphere was tense, every word from the judge carrying more weight than steel. After reviewing the evidence once more, she delivered her decision in a voice even and clear. I hereby grant emergency legal guardianship of Lily Morgan to Mr. Ethan Cole. Full custody will be considered pending review and home visits over the next 6 months. Effective immediately. The words washed over Ethan like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. He exhaled a sound more like a sob than a sigh. Across the aisle, Mark rose angrily, fists clenched, but the judge silenced him with one sharp glance. He could protest, but it would not matter. The law had chosen, but more importantly, Lily had chosen. A week later, Ethan stood before a modest 2-story brick house on the north side of the city. Maple trees lined the street, their bare branches promising spring. Lily stood beside him, her breath visible in the crisp air, her eyes wide as she looked up at the house. "It smells like cinnamon," she said softly, catching the scent of a neighbor's baking. Ethan smiled. "That is Mrs. Hanley. You will meet her soon. She teaches violin." Inside, the living room glowed with afternoon light. Her drawings already hung in simple frames on the walls, filling the space with color. Upstairs, her room was ready with a beanbag, books stacked neatly, and glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to the ceiling. On the kitchen counter, a note written in Ethan's careful handwriting waited for her. "Welcome home, Lily." She touched it gently with her fingertips, her voice barely a whisper. "Is this really ours?" Ethan knelt beside her, his eyes damp. "It is yours. And yes, it is real." That night, they sat together on the couch. Grilled cheese on their plates, a blanket tucked around them as snow danced outside. Lily leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Her eyes grew heavy, fluttering shut just before she whispered, "Do you think everything will stay like this?" Ethan looked down at her, a lump rising in his throat. "It will not always be easy," he admitted honestly, "but I will be here, always." She nodded faintly, her lips curving into the smallest of smiles. "Then I do not need anything else." And in that moment, surrounded by warmth, by crayons and laughter, by the quiet hum of belonging, Ethan realized that he had finally found what years of ambition had never given him. He had found home. Snow blanketed the yard in soft white curves, glittering under the pale morning sun. From the kitchen window, Ethan watched as Lily darted barefoot across the porch, squealing at the sting of the cold before racing back inside, her laughter echoing through the house. She grinned up at him, her cheeks flushed pink, her robe trailing behind like a cape. "I had to check if it was real snow," she said between giggles. "It is the first time I have ever had my own yard." Ethan knelt, wrapping a towel around her small feet, rubbing them gently. "It is real," he said softly, "and it is all yours." The townhouse felt alive in ways Ethan never imagined possible. 2 weeks had passed since the court ruling, and the rhythm of their days had begun to feel like something permanent. Mornings smelled of blueberry pancakes, Lily's favorite, while jazz or soft classical music filled the background. The kitchen, once a sterile place of stainless steel and silence, now bore the marks of life crumbs on the counter, drawings pinned to the fridge, a mug of cocoa cooling beside a stack of crayons. After breakfast, Lily would spread her art supplies across the living room rug, cross-legged in oversized sweaters he had bought for her. She would hum softly as she colored, her tongue poking out in concentration, and Ethan would find himself simply watching her, as though the act of being present was the most important business he had ever conducted. Sometimes she would hand him a crayon, insisting he help finish a picture. His attempts were clumsy, but her laughter when he drew a crooked star or lopsided house was worth more than any deal he had ever signed. One afternoon, she showed him a drawing of their house. This time, the figures were more detailed. A girl in a purple coat, a tall man with his arms spread protectively, and above them, an angel with wings shaped like clouds. "Do you think it looks like us?" she asked shyly. Ethan blinked back the sting in his eyes. "I think it is perfect." He folded the drawing and placed it carefully in his desk, a promise to himself that he would never forget what mattered now. Evenings carried a gentle routine. Dinner was simple but shared grilled chicken, mac and cheese, sometimes soup when the air was especially cold. They would curl up on the couch under a blanket, watching animated films, Lily giggling when Ethan pretended to misunderstand the characters. More often than not, she would drift off before the credits rolled, her head resting on his arm. He would carry her upstairs, tuck her beneath the glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling, and linger until her breathing evened out.
Before it was an empty
Once,
room.
just before
Now
sleep
it is
claimed
full.
her, she whispered, "You are going to
I like
stay,
this
right?"
better.
He leaned close, brushing her hair back gently. Always. But even in peace, shadows lingered. One evening, a manila envelope arrived at the front door papers from Mark's lawyer, demanding reconsideration of custody. Ethan's chest tightened as he read the harsh words, but he refused to let fear seep into the walls of Lily's new home. He met with Nora Whitman again for a scheduled visit, showing her the space Lily now thrived in. Nora walked through each room, nodding at the books stacked neatly, the clothes folded in drawers, the drawings hung carefully at eye level. Over cocoa at the kitchen table, she looked at Ethan with a faint smile. "She is thriving," she said. "I see joy, stability, security, and plenty of pancakes." Ethan laughed quietly. "I am working on the eggs." That night, as they ate mac and cheese on the couch, Lily turned to him suddenly. "Do you miss being alone?" The question startled him. He paused the movie, meeting her earnest gaze. "Why do you ask that?" She shrugged, fiddling with her doll. "You were alone for a long time before me." Ethan thought for a moment, then answered with honesty. "I used to think being alone made me strong, but it did not. It only made me quiet." She leaned her head against his shoulder, her voice soft. "I like you not quiet." He smiled, pressing a kiss to the top of her hair. "So do I." Days passed into weeks, each one weaving them closer together. At the park, Lily ran with other children, her laughter ringing out without hesitation. At the bookstore, she tugged at his sleeve, showing him fairy tales she wanted him to read aloud. At home, she filled every corner with color and sound, transforming Ethan's life from polished silence to a messy, beautiful symphony. One evening, after tucking her in, Ethan noticed a new picture on her nightstand. It was their house again, but this time, a banner stretched above the door in shaky, careful letters. "This is home." He stood there a long time, his chest heavy with emotion. Downstairs, he poured a glass of water and stared out at the snowy yard. Sophia's voice returned to him, a memory from their college days. "Love is not something you find. It is something you build, one choice at a time." He had not understood then, he did now. The girl asleep upstairs was not his by blood, but she was his in every way that mattered. She had given him back pieces of himself he thought were gone forever. He was not perfect, but he had learned the most important lesson showing up, staying, choosing her every day. And as snow fell quietly outside, Ethan whispered into the silence, "Thank you, Sophia, for bringing her to me." Upstairs, under a ceiling scattered with glowing stars, Lily dreamed with a smile on her face, knowing without doubt that she was finally home.
Where could it
Sometimes the most powerful transformations begin not with grand gestures, but with quiet choices. A man sitting alone on a snowy bench, a child whispering for help, a promise spoken in the cold. Ethan Cole had once believed success was measured in numbers, in contracts, in the size of the empire he built. But in Lily's eyes, in her fragile trust, he discovered a truth that shattered everything he thought he knew. Success was not about control. It was about showing up. It was about staying. It was about love that chooses day after day to protect, to nurture, to be present. For Lily, the journey from fear to safety was not instant. It was built moment by moment. The first hot chocolate she held with trembling hands, the first real smile when she received a doll of her own, the first time she whispered, "You are going to stay, right?" and believed the answer. Those moments stitched together the fabric of home, stronger than any walls or roofs. Her drawings told the story better than words ever could pictures of a house, a man in a suit, and an angel watching from above. Each drawing a prayer, each one a testimony that love, once given, does not disappear. It only finds new ways to remain. For Ethan, every choice drew him closer to a life he had never imagined. Canceling meetings, missing speeches, ignoring the roar of the business world, things that once defined him now seemed insignificant.
What do you think
What mattered was the sound of Lily's laughter filling his home, the weight of her small hand in his, the way her voice softened when she called him family. In her, he did not just find redemption for the choices of his past. He found the courage to be the man he was always meant to be. Not a CEO, not a symbol of wealth, but a father. And so, The story of a lonely man and a lost child became something greater. A story of healing, of finding home in the most unexpected places, of love that rebuilds broken pieces into something whole. The snow that once symbolized silence and loss now marked the beginning of warmth, of belonging, of family.
This is delicious.
If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that love often arrives when we least expect it, stay with us. Subscribe to Loss and Healing, where every story is a reminder that even on the coldest nights, hope waits quietly for someone to choose it. Because sometimes, the greatest miracle is not in being found, but in being chosen and in choosing to stay.